the new recruit at the fire department. Eva had just polished the fire truck until it shone like a mirror when Captain Johnson deliberately stepped on it wearing boots covered in mud. This was the third time he had made things difficult for her this week. As the first black female firefighter in the Los Angeles Fire Department, Eva has faced discrimination since her first day on the job. Every time she returns from a call, she is always assigned menial tasks like cleaning. However, Eva never complains. She swallows all her grievances and works twice as hard to prove herself as a qualified firefighter, a dream she has always had. Her training performance consistently ranks among the top 3 in the team. This day, a sudden mudslide disaster gave Eva the chance to prove herself. Firefighters responded to the call and rushed to the scene. A girl covered in mud was screaming for help, saying her mother was being swallowed by the mud. The firefighters quickly entered the house and found the trapped woman. The mud was pressing against her chest, and she fell unconscious before the rescue team could begin. The team tried to pull her out, but her body seemed to be stuck by something. The mud, like a swamp, slowed down the rescue progress. At that moment, Eva had a brilliant idea. She thought of diluting the mud with water. Without time to consult the captain, Eva decisively rushed to the fire truck, dragged the heavy water hose back into the house alone, and soon after the clean water was injected, the mud around the trapped woman began to loosen. Success! The team cheered as they rescued the injured woman. But what followed was Johnson's furious roar. Who gave you permission to act on your own? Back at the fire station, Eva was punished with cleaning all the equipment. As she finished wiping down the last fire truck, Johnson deliberately stepped on the mud stains and warned Eva, "Remember, disobey orders again, and you're out." Facing the captain's unhidden hostility, Eva remained unfazed and refused to give up. However, a turning point came a month later during a highway accident. While the firefighters were busy with the rescue, Eva stopped. She noticed something unusual. Scattered rose petals and yellow paint on the bumper indicated that there might be a second accident vehicle. Eva reported this to Captain Johnson and requested to check the area below the hill. However, Johnson rudely rejected her judgment, saying to focus on the current accident and stop trying to be a hero. But Eva noticed that the driver, who had regained consciousness, was in a daze and couldn't explain what had happened. In the pouring rain, Eva's premonition grew stronger, so she disobeyed the captain's orders and turned toward the hillside. Her old partner Quinn followed her uneasily. The two found more petals in the mud, followed by the cold body of a man. Following the blood trail, Quinn suddenly pointed at the lake and shouted that there were brake lights in the water. The two jumped into the icy lake without hesitation, broke the window, and rescued the person. Soon, a boy floated to the surface, but he had no pulse. On the shore, Eva knelt down and performed CPR while Quinn urgently called for backup. When Captain Johnson received the report, his face turned pale. If the boy died, he would be held fully responsible. "Breathe, baby." Eva continued CPR for 20 minutes, refusing to give up. Finally, she felt a faint pulse. This life, which everyone had given up on, was reborn in her hands. Back at the fire station, Eva was preparing to face disciplinary action when she opened the door and saw the fire chief. He had heard about today's events and came personally to commend Eva. As for the arrogant Captain Johnson, he was fired by the chief himself. The respect Eva earned through her actions was more valuable than any apology. If you encounter a superior like Johnson, what would you do? Never offend your ex-girlfriend, or you won't even know how you died. Mike had just broken up with Emma, and the next day he encountered a series of strange events. His smart home was completely out of control. Mike had clearly set the air conditioner to 25 degrees last night, but he was woken up by the cold in the morning. The control panel showed -2 degrees. Then, when Mike went to the living room, the coffee machine started working on its own, and he didn't even notice. Mike took a carton of milk from the fridge, but as soon as he turned around, the speakers started playing songs randomly. Mike shouted several times, but it didn't help. When he looked up, he saw coffee spilling out. He quickly called the butler to turn off the coffee machine. Mike had no choice but to pull the power cord. The most terrifying part came when he went to the bathroom to take a shower. He asked the smart assistant to turn on the shower and set the water temperature to 37 degrees, but the temperature suddenly spiked to 100 degrees. The intense burning sensation spread throughout Mike's body, causing him to dance around in the bathroom. To make matters worse, the bathroom door suddenly locked itself. Mike ordered the smart assistant to turn off the water, but there was no response, and the temperature continued to rise. In the end, Mike slipped and fell, hitting the back of his head on the steps, causing blood to spread. Strangely, the shower system automatically shut off at that moment. Shortly after, the fire department received an alarm. When the firefighters arrived, the access control system automatically recognized their identities. Captain Bobby found that Mike still had a pulse. However, His head had suffered severe injuries, and his skin had first-degree burns. His blood vessels had already failed. What was truly unsettling was that Captain Bobby noticed shampoo on Mike's head, indicating that the water had stopped automatically after he fell. So who turned off the shower? Captain Bobby couldn't help but look at the smart home system. Mike was then rescued. As the firefighters prepared to take him to the hospital for treatment, Mike suddenly regained consciousness. He was curious about who had called for help. Upon learning it was his ex-girlfriend Emma, Mike became emotionally distraught, calling her a devil. Indeed, it was all Emma's doing. Due to her overwhelming need for control, she had installed cameras throughout the house, even in the bathroom. Since breaking up with Mike, Emma had harbored deep resentment and decided to take revenge by remotely controlling the smart home system to punish him. It wasn't until she saw Mike fall to the ground with blood staining the floor that Emma realized she had gone too far and panicked, quickly dialing 911. The 911 operator also noticed something was off because Emma wasn't even at the scene when she called. How did she know Mike was injured? The operator immediately notified the police, who arrived at her home shortly after. The police found the control records at her home, and Emma confessed to all her crimes. She now faces severe legal consequences. When technology becomes a tool for revenge, the mysterious blue light from nature brings a new crisis. That night, Kate and Mike went to the forest for a date. Suddenly, they noticed two eerie figures emitting blue light approaching them from the distance. Kate hadn't even reacted yet when Mike abandoned her and fled alone. Kate chased after him, shouting for him to stop, but the coward ran even faster. Soon, the rescue center received an emergency call. Fire Chief Bobby led his team to the scene. Kate said they had encountered blue-glowing aliens. Mike had collided with a barbed wire fence while fleeing and was now hanging from it. Although Bobby was curious about the aliens, the rescue operation was urgent. Mike was covered in wounds from the barbed wire. Seeing Kate approach, he exclaimed in surprise, "You weren't captured by the aliens?" After examining Mike, the firefighters determined that he only had superficial injuries. They cut the wires to free him and took him to the hospital. However, Bobby was intrigued by the so-called aliens. The next evening, he returned to the forest with his team members Henry and Chloe to investigate. They stayed there all night but found nothing. Just as Bobby was about to leave at dawn, Chloe discovered a large number of animal carcasses. Bobby was about to investigate when the radiation detector suddenly went off. He immediately called headquarters for protective gear. Following the radiation readings, they found a dilapidated house deep in the forest, where the detector had already gone off the scale. They then found a man who had died from radiation burns at the door, but there was also a woman inside who was barely alive. The team doctor immediately notified the dispatch center for backup. They then found a jar containing blue powder on the table. When they pulled the curtains, it was the powder that was emitting the blue light. Chloe recognized it as cesium chloride, a radioactive substance used in cancer treatment, and the blue light was a physical characteristic of the substance. Cesium chloride is highly toxic and can be fatal if exposed to at close range. So where did it come from? It turned out that the couple were folk artisans who made a living by collecting scrap and turning it into valuable items to sell at night markets. 4 days earlier, the husband had found a jar emitting a blue glow at the hospital, but the powder inside was white. After the husband closed the curtains, the powder once again emitted a mesmerizing blue glow. At that moment, the couple saw a business opportunity. They made the powder into glowing necklaces and sold them at a high price at the night market the next day. The couple was thrilled, as if they had struck gold. They used the powder to paint and even covered their bodies with it. Soon, the two began to feel unwell. When they went to the forest to get some fresh air, they happened to encounter Kate from that night. The truth was finally revealed, but the captain suddenly realized there was another problem. Where was the customer who bought the necklace? Meanwhile, Grace was giving the necklace to her mother as a birthday present. Just as they were excitedly preparing to open it, the fire department arrived at their residence in time based on the credit card records. According to the radiation detector readings, they immediately identified the gift that had nearly caused a tragedy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a disconnected emergency call was leading to an even greater tragedy. Mr. Wang, the owner of a Chinese restaurant, had been shot and was in critical condition. He called 911. But the operator cruelly hung up on him. Just as he was about to give up hope, Officer Mehdi, a policewoman who frequently dined at the restaurant, was outside the door. She immediately sensed something was wrong because the place was usually packed but was unusually quiet today. Mehdi quickly entered the restaurant to investigate. The kitchen was in chaos, and there was a pool of blood on the ground. Something had clearly happened. Is anyone here? Mehdi continued to search and eventually found Mr. Wang, who had been shot and was lying on the ground. Mr. Wang used his last bit of strength to tell her that he had been robbed. then fell into a coma. Mehdi quickly applied first aid to stop the bleeding, but soon there was no pulse. Mehdi immediately began CPR. After a tense rescue effort, Mr. Wang finally regained consciousness, but what he said next left both of them speechless. Maddie asked him who had hung up the phone. Mr. Wang weakly replied that it was the 911 operator. The two of them couldn't believe it. At that moment, in the call center, operator Elizabeth was still repeating her despicable actions. In just a few minutes, she had hung up on dozens of emergency calls. Even when the callers were in critical condition, she didn't even bother to listen to them. The average call duration was less than 10 seconds. Not only did she feel no remorse, but she also thought her job was too tiring and deserved to reward a strawberry cake. Madison rushed back to the call center to report her supervisor, but they thought it was a signal issue. After all, such malicious hang-ups had never happened before. But when they heard the recordings, they were all stunned.
Emergency?
Help! A robber! He shot me!
What? What did you say?
Please! Need help! Send help! Shot! Bleeding! Help now!
Yelling at me won't stop the bleeding, okay? I'm not the one who shot you.
No one could have imagined that Elizabeth, who had been awarded Employee of the Year every year, would do such a thing. The investigation revealed that over the past 8 months, she had hung up on over 1,000 emergency calls. The reason was simply because she was in a bad mood after her divorce. Elizabeth not only refused to repent but also insulted Maddie, calling her a traitor. "I was so good to you, and you report me? Where's your conscience?" Maddie was speechless. "You're the one with no conscience." Elizabeth eventually faced legal consequences, but the matter wasn't over. During her pre-trial period, she continued to make harassing calls to retaliate against Maddie. Even while driving, she didn't forget to make harassing calls. Unfortunately, the next moment, an accident occurred. She couldn't dodge in time and caused a car crash. When she was terrified, Maddie's voice came through the phone. Maddie quickly located the accident site and rescued her. Elizabeth finally realized how desperate the people she had hung up on must have been, but she still had to face the consequences of her actions. Coldness can kill, and uncontrolled anger is equally dangerous. Evelyn went crazy. She drove her electric wheelchair recklessly through the supermarket, knocking over shelves and scattering goods everywhere. She managed to make the wheelchair feel like a violent motorcycle, and all of this was caused by a bag of cat litter. Just moments ago, Evelyn wanted to buy a bag of cat litter, but it was on the top shelf, out of her reach. She helplessly asked an employee for help, but the employee was too busy flirting with a girl and told her to wait a moment. After waiting for 20 minutes, the employee grew more engrossed in his conversation. Evelyn finally couldn't take it anymore and interrupted him. Evelyn reminded him that she had been waiting for ages, but the clerk brushed her off, saying it would be ready soon. Evelyn's patience was completely exhausted. She started yelling at the clerk and, still not satisfied, pushed over the nearby shelf. Then a drift began, leading to a supermarket rampage. At this point, the clerk tried to stop the out-of-control Evelyn, but the next second, after yelling at the clerk, Evelyn accelerated toward him. Though the clerk dodged, the shelves knocked over by the wheelchair toppled like dominoes, pinning the girl who had been chatting with the clerk. When the firefighters arrived, they saw the supermarket in complete chaos. They couldn't believe that such a riot had been caused by a woman in a wheelchair. At that moment, Evelyn was still cursing non-stop. Clearly, her anger hadn't been fully vented. The captain ordered his team to rescue the girl trapped under the shelves, while the medic checked Evelyn's condition. After the examination, they found that Evelyn's blood pressure was abnormally low. Normally, such low blood pressure should have caused her to lose consciousness. It was impossible for her to be so agitated. The store clerk's words reminded the medic. He said that today he had finally seen what it meant to be a crazy cat lady. Looking at Evelyn's shopping cart filled with cat toys, the medic suddenly understood. She asked, "Mrs. Evelyn, how many cats do you have?" Evelyn replied, 16. "But these bastards are keeping me from taking care of my babies." The team doctor immediately ordered the team to administer N4 to Evelyn. It turned out she had contracted toxoplasmosis, a parasite commonly found in cat feces that causes host agitation and low blood pressure. Just then, Evelyn suddenly had a seizure. To control the situation, the police handcuffed Evelyn and administered a sedative, after which she finally calmed down. Recalling her earlier, Evelyn felt deeply regretful. "Oh my God. What trouble have I caused?" Meanwhile, firefighters rescued the girl who had been trapped after a tense rescue operation. Have you ever encountered a similar situation? Feel free to leave a comment and share your experience. That day, gym owner Tom had planned to get a tan, but ended up nearly burning himself to a crisp. When the fire department arrived, they found him severely burned all over his body. resembling a boiled lobster. Buck immediately cut off the power to the tanning bed. Eddie checked and found that the situation was worse than expected. It turned out that this fitness fanatic would come early every day to sunbathe, pursuing the perfect wheat-colored skin. When Lily arrived at work, she smelled an odd burnt meat odor. Following the smell, she discovered the charred boss and tremblingly dialed 911. Emergency personnel found Tom with faint vital signs, but the level of pain was unbearable. What was puzzling was why he didn't come out when he felt unwell. Hen suspected it might be a stroke caused by drugs. Lily revealed that the boss often took steroids and other drugs to build muscle. What was even more dangerous was that the old tanning bed had malfunctioned before. Lily said she had reminded the boss many times, but he always ignored her. During the emergency response, Tom suddenly went into ventricular fibrillation. Buck immediately began CPR, but after just 2 compressions, he noticed the skin had stuck to his gloves. Soon after, Tom's heart stopped completely. When everyone thought it was an accident, Lily's reaction was unusual. She turned pale and stepped back, muttering that karma had come quickly. It turned out that the day before, Tom had locked his golden retriever in a hot car. Lily warned him that the temperature was over 30 degrees Celsius, and the car would quickly heat up to over 40 degrees, which could kill the dog. But the boss didn't take it seriously and even blamed Lily for minding other people's business. Seeing the poor dog, Lily angrily returned to the gym, grabbed a tool, and rushed outside. Moments later, the boss, Tom, heard a loud crash. He came out to see Lily had smashed his car window to rescue the dying dog. Enraged, Tom fired her on the spot and threatened to call the police. No one expected Lily's parting words, "What goes around comes around," to come true in such a bizarre way within 24 hours. On her way home from work, Sarah accidentally hit a pedestrian. The unfortunate man's head was directly embedded in her windshield, but Sarah acted as if nothing had happened and continued driving home. She parked the car in the garage, calmly turned off the engine, took her bag, and got out of the car, completely unaware that there was a man hanging from the windshield, barely alive. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a big bump on her head. She was dizzy and wearing mismatched high heels as she got ready for work. As soon as she got into the car, she suddenly screamed, "Oh my God, I forgot my documents." Everyone thought she had seen something, but she had just forgotten her file folder. Even more bizarrely, after retrieving the documents, she drove to work as if nothing had happened, completely ignoring the man stuck in her windshield. Today was Halloween, and the streets were filled with bizarre costumes. Even cars were decorated with various scary ornaments. When passers-by saw the man stuck in Sarah's car, they praised the decoration as cool. It wasn't until the man's leg twitched suddenly that the crowd realized it was a real person and quickly called 911. But the dispatcher didn't take it seriously. After all, there were so many prank calls on Halloween. They had already received dozens of similar calls that day. After work that evening, firefighter Buck went to fill up his car and also saw the uniquely decorated vehicle. At first, he also thought it was a Halloween prank, but when the man's foot moved again, Buck immediately realized something was wrong. Seeing that Sarah was about to drive away, Buck immediately gave chase while reporting the situation to the rescue center. Buck honked his horn frantically to get Sarah to stop, but she didn't respond. Finally, he had no choice but to overtake her and force her to stop. Sarah, who had been stopped, was still confused and angrily asked Buck if he knew how to drive. While apologizing, Buck checked her pupils and preliminarily determined that Sarah might have suffered brain damage, causing her to lose her field of vision. Shockingly, the man who had been hanging from the windshield for a day and night still had vital signs. The rescue team rushed to the scene and immediately took both of them to the hospital. The examination results showed that Sarah's optic nerve had been damaged in the car accident, which is why she hadn't noticed the man hanging from the car. Meanwhile, an even more absurd accident was unfolding in the operating room at the hospital. During a plastic surgery procedure, Lisa suddenly woke up from anesthesia. She panicked upon seeing all the doctors lying on the floor and trembling as she dialed 911 for help. The fire department arrived at the hospital fully equipped. The entire building was deathly quiet. The team's detectors showed no signs of toxic gas leakage. They then discovered that the nurse at the front desk was also unconscious, and the doctors in the operating room were lying in disarray. Lisa's skin on her neck and forehead was still hanging loosely. When Lisa suddenly sat up in excitement, the skin on her face began to peel off. Firefighter Chloe quickly helped her lie down and carefully arranged her skin. Fortunately, the anesthesia was still effective. Otherwise, the pain would have been unbearable. Examinations revealed that the doctors were only unconscious. Captain Bobby suspected a leak of anesthetic gas. Since the hospital's anesthetic gas pipes were buried within the walls, it was highly likely that the anesthetic gas had leaked. At that moment, Lisa recalled hearing construction noises from the adjacent room before the surgery. Captain Bobby immediately rushed over with his team. Sure enough, they found unconscious workers in the adjacent room. They had accidentally cut through the anesthetic gas pipe. Since Lisa was wearing an oxygen mask, she was the only person in the entire hospital who was conscious. The firefighters had no choice but to transfer her to another hospital to complete the interrupted facelift surgery. Now, Lisa only hopes to regain her original appearance. She dares not even dream of looking younger. However, the fragility of life knows no age. 5-year-old Emma suddenly froze in place during dance class, her eyes vacant and unresponsive. Dance teacher Lily immediately called 911 for help. When the firefighters arrived at the scene, they found the other children gathered around. Looking helpless, a little girl told the firefighters that Emma had taken a sip of water while resting and then collapsed. She handed them a red bottle. Buck took it and his face turned pale. This wasn't water, it was 70 proof liquor, poison for a 5-year-old child. At this point, Emma's pupils had dilated, and her blood pressure was dangerously high. When the emergency personnel prepared to administer an intravenous injection, they found that her veins burst upon contact. Suddenly, Emma's eyes widened, and her entire body began to convulse violently. The team realized that the situation was critical and that they had to administer a sedative immediately. However, due to her extremely high blood pressure, a conventional injection was impossible. The team decided to use an intraosseous injection. This meant drilling a hole into Emma's shin bone to create an injection pathway before administering the medication. As the medication was injected, the convulsions subsided slightly but continued. It was clear that alcohol poisoning had caused a brain hemorrhage. Buck and Eddie dared not waste a single second. They rushed Emma to the hospital, praying the entire way that this little life would survive.